Ontario not learning the lesson of Greece? I'm Brian Lilley with TheRebel.Media. Ontario, or is it Ontari-owe, as in we owe a ton of money in this province. Right now, according to the Ontario Financing Authority, public debt for the province is $302.2 billion. Non-public debt for the province, $12.3 billion. So we've got a total provincial debt of $315 billion. That means that every man, woman, and child in this province owes $23,028. An average family of four is on the hook for a little more than $92,000 in provincial debt. Remember, that's before your own household debt or the federal debt is added in. Oh, and by the way, the federal debt is still too high, but the feds at least only have us on the hook for $17,000 a pop. So in the midst of all of this, Ontario has been downgraded by the ratings agency Standard & Poor's. The venerable agency dropped Ontario's rating from A+ to AA-. Standard & Poor's saying this about their decision. Quote, "The downgrade reflects our view that Ontario is a sustained and projected underperformer on its budgetary performance and debt burden versus domestic and international peers. Although Ontario continues to beat its fiscal targets and expects to close its operating budget gap by fiscal 2018, year ended March 31st, it will still have to contend with sizable yearly after capital deficits given its large net capital spending intentions," meaning all that infrastructure spending is really going to hurt us here. Now, sustained and projected underperformer versus its peers, that's like saying, the teacher saying on your report card, "You aren't trying very hard, little Johnny, and you could do a lot better than the rest of the kids in the class." This is not a good thing for Ontario. Let me give you a real important stat here. The annual interest rate, or the annual interest payment on the provincial debt, according to the Financing Authority, is $11.4 billion. That's more than we spend on any program outside of healthcare and education. $11.4 billion just on the interest on the debt. And this bond rating change could make that number go up. It's not like S&P or any other ratings agency is saying that Ontario is going to pull a Greece and go under, but we could be paying slightly higher interest rates on future borrowing. And when you're servicing $315 billion in debt, paying just a small amount more will add to your overall costs. And costs will go up. In their news release on the downgrade, S&P noted Ontario's plans to spend a lot more on infrastructure in coming years. In the next 2 years, however, we expect capital funding needs to cause Ontario's tax-supported debt to peak at 267% of consolidated operating revenues and its interest payment to remain near 9% of adjusted operating revenues, which we consider very high. So as the province spends billions of dollars it doesn't have on infrastructure, the debt will rise, all of this happening as economic growth across Canada slows, partly based on a drop in the price of oil. Premier Kathleen Wynne, currently hosting Al Gore in Toronto for a climate change conference, well, she can take some solace in the fact that greenhouse gas emissions will fall along with economic activity, and that might make her feel better. But the truth is, it won't pay the bills. It won't pay for that $11.4 billion interest payment on the debt. Now, I know plenty of people, including many on the left, like to say deficit spending and government debt don't matter. But consider this, that interest payment, which is only going to grow and which must be paid to keep the rest of the deficit financing flowing, well, that's more than the province spends on social assistance programs. Could you enhance welfare with that money? It's more than we spend on colleges and universities. Could you lower tuition or improve loan and grant programs with that money? It's nearly 10 times what we spend on economic development. It's 20 times what the province spends on its climate change office. What could be done with that money if it wasn't being used to service ever-growing debt levels? All governments have debt. All governments will at some point do deficit spending. It's a reality of life, like it or not. But while other governments are shrinking their deficits, looking towards balanced budgets, Ontario continues to grow, but only in the wrong way, in the red ink side. The province may not be at the level of Greece yet, but it's certainly heading closer to that direction, and that is not good news for any of us.